Alright, friends, I've been telling you about Big Fork Brands recently, but I need to redo the promo. Because you see, they recently sent me a sample of their products, including pork jerky in original, three pepper, and maple flavors, and their pork sticks in original, Thai green curry, and maple pepper. And I've got to tell you, it is all delicious. It's only with extreme willpower that I didn't just eat it all up on the first day. See, I like dried meat. In particular, I often eat good quality beef sticks for a quick protein snack, especially as I've gotten back into working out lately. The stuff that they sent me from Big Fork is so good, and it's made by a family-owned business in Chicago, and you can really taste the difference in craftsmanship between this product and the major brands. And the good news is that Big Fork is giving a special deal to my listeners. Go to bigforkbrands.com and use the code MythicMind at checkout for 20% off your order. That's bigforkbrands.com. That's bigforkbrands.com and use the code MythicMind. And you can find a link to all current Mythic Mind deals in the show notes. Also, I just recorded my live reactions to trying these products for the first time, and so stick around at the end for that. Hello and welcome to Mythic Mind Movies and Shows, an extension of the Mythic Mind Fellowship, where we pursue wisdom on the paths between primary and secondary worlds. I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I'm glad that you're here. All right, welcome back as we continue with our Star Wars series. Getting pretty close to the end here. We finished the mainline movies. Now we're going back to Rogue One, which, generally speaking, at least in the conversations I've had, it's usually pretty well liked, pretty well appreciated. I like it overall. I can't say I love it, but I don't have strong feelings against it. And so that's definitely moving us in a positive direction compared to some of the places we have been recently. And so I suppose that's about all I have to say about it right away. I guess for me, as I said before, I feel like Star Wars is really at its best when it's at its most archetypal. That's why I like the originals the most. I find the prequels enjoyable. I think there's some worthwhile stuff. Most of what comes after that, it just doesn't really grip me because I feel like for this movie in particular, I mean, they're telling kind of like a, I don't know, spy adventure story. I just feel like you can get that in better versions elsewhere than what Star Wars is equipped to provide. But that being said, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't really stand out to me, but it doesn't really stand out against me either. And it does have some cool scenes, some good lines that we'll get to as we move forward. But those are my kind of, I don't know, boring initial thoughts. Um, let's see. Ian, I haven't let you go first for a while. What do you have for us?
Well, as someone whose favorite Star Wars stories are the X-Wing Rogue Squadron novels, you might think that Rogue One should be my favorite of the Disney movies. However, I would point out that Rogue One is a bait-and-switch title. There are no real X-Wing pilot characters in this entire story, and the X-Wings we do see all die, so there's no point in getting attached to them. And in fact, every single named character in this movie dies, so getting attached to any of them is a fruitless gesture, especially given how shallowly and poorly they're written. Everyone is written as a complete idiot, and the crux of the movie hinges on solving a problem that wasn't a problem in the original trilogy, and so I just really dislike this movie.
Fair thoughts. All right, let's bounce that out. Who loves this movie? All right, David, you're next.
All right.
Or, yeah, Lady David.
Oh, did Reverend David love this movie or I didn't? Okay. Yeah. I love this movie. One of the things I love is how it kind of signaled a moment when Star Wars had finally reached a point where they could tell stories that didn't always involve Jedi. I mean, Darth Vader's got a lightsaber in this movie, but apart from that, it is not about that aspect of Star Wars like all of the other movies have been. I love the way the Death Star's depicted in this. It really doesn't get a whole lot of airtime in the original movie. I just, the beach, AT-AT stomping through palm trees, the guerrilla warfare, and this gang of misfits. I don't think they're as shallow as Ian says they are, and I like it has a tragic ending that it's going to have pretty much. It's sort of like Halo Reach, the video game. Like I knew all these people are going to die when I get to the end, but that does not minimize the story that's going to take place. So, I mean, the CG actors don't really work. Um, James Earl Jones is in his 90s and his voice is kind of thin and weak, and AI models weren't there yet when they made this. So Vader doesn't sound as menacing as he could. But overall, I just think it's a well-made and convincing new story that's set in the old Star Wars universe. I love the way that they made things in this movie feel like they were practical effects from the 70s, right down to the hairstyles that people had and things like that. So from an artistic standpoint, I also think it's really well done. So, and I am a fan of the Andor series that has come out since then. And I rewatched this Saturday, and that's the first time I'd watched it since I watched Andor. And I think it had a little more impact from having seen that.
And also that even though Vader is a not a central character in the story, as you said, he is at his peak on aesthetics. Like he just he looks really cool. You know, he has cool actions, and he even throws in a dad joke. And so it's
That's right.
that choke on your aspirations or whatever. That line is one of the best in the movie, I think. I'm glad he developed a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Reverend David, what do you have for us?
So the things that I like about this movie, I like, and then there are some things I don't like. I'll start with one thing I really don't like, and that is the soundtrack for this movie. Unlike a John Williams soundtrack where he makes tracks that not only work for the scene, but work for an actual soundtrack you can listen to, the soundtracks on for this movie are just here's what it is for the scene, and then it abruptly ends, and it hurts the ears for me. um love K2SO. I could watch a show just on random adventures of K2SO. I would love to see a Blaze and I can never pronounce the blind character's name. But just to see those two in some sort of buddy cop show, I think would be interesting. I love the fact that Donnie Yen essentially created a martial art for this film that he called Blind Fu. Um, I I loved watching him just uh beat up on stormtroopers, and he himself had a dad joke in there. Oh, is your foot all right there? Um and then the I'm blind um line. Um the creature, the Borg Gelet, everything about that creature's design just was very weird for me, and I don't know, it just I didn't like that particular character. Um, the one kind of idea that I liked that was never necessarily stated is that you could see the will of the Force throughout the entirety of the movie, and not in a way where it's just like, oh, this is what we must think in order for this movie to make sense. It was there in the sense that if one thing goes a different way, episode 4 doesn't happen. And whereas with a movie like Solo, I know that's next time, that in my opinion you kind of almost have to have that idea in order to explain that movie. This one, it's just to me there naturally, that you see the will of the Force throughout the movie, despite the fact that Andor himself doesn't think that him and the Force jive together. Loved the Hammerhead Corvette. I loved that use of it. And then, unfortunately, I'm finishing on a negative here. I thought all the Star Destroyers looked like models that somebody just made in their spare time and just forgot to color them in. So those are my thoughts.
Interesting. You know, I'll say that just as with the sequels, when you brought up the soundtracks, I just don't think I really thought about the music for this movie. I don't know. It stood out to me, positively or negatively. So, but it's probably something worth considering.
You've never been on road trips long enough.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, David, you're the soundtrack guy. Ian is the really technical about the depiction of the pilot's guy. So it's we need to have these kinds of balances in our discussions because yeah,
Exactly.
I thought about the music a little at first when it's kind of strange how I, I I thought it was good that they showed a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away and just cut to the action because this is not, this is not one of the cardinal numbered films. It was reminding us of that. This is a story in the universe. And so I thought that was a clever thing to do.
I will say on that, the very first movie, episode 4, is extremely cut to the action. When I actually first watched it, I was like, wait, there's no like exposition or anything. I don't know who any of these people are exactly. Yeah, it's a Star Wars thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I will say too, what Reverend David was saying about how you see the will of the Force here. Maybe this is a little cynical, but it's very easy to display providence when you're backing up right into a movie that's already made, right? You know exactly how things have to turn out. And so that really puts you on some rails here. But I mean, I guess more artistically, you could say that there's the will of the Force at play here. But yeah, kind of things more or less had to end up the way that they did, including everyone dying, which is why they aren't in the next movies, right? Like that kind of had to happen.
See, that's why you shouldn't tell this story. You should tell a story about a different part of the rebellion that doesn't die.
But you can tell that one too.
Well, Michael, if Michael were here, he would be like, well, that's Rebels. To which I say, but Rebels is written for babies.
I would say my thoughts. I quite liked this movie actually, which was a bit surprising to me after the last three that we've watched. I would, if I were just going to pick a random movie, I would rank it above the sequel trilogy in my preference. We were saying earlier we each have our niche, and I'm kind of the guy, the world building guy. So I really appreciated the incredible amount of detail in this movie, but unlike the prequel trilogy, it didn't come off as like a history book because I know that was something that was criticized about the prequels. This one, they managed to pack an incredible amount of detail into the design of the world, but interweaved it with a plot that had enough depth and interest that you don't really think about the world building the same way. So I really appreciated that. I did read that the person who first pitched Rogue One was like a visual effects supervisor. And I can absolutely see that. The visuals overall very well done. So one of you was saying earlier, like the rebels on Scarif, their design, their tactics, like all of that stuff was much more well thought out on a detailed level, which I really appreciated. And then we had some bigger themes on top of that too that we could discuss, and I'm sure that we'll get to that, so I won't just go over them now. But things about like how do you resist tyranny, whether you should follow orders, or if you should always follow what's morally right. All these kinds of deeper questions are interweaved in that. So yeah, I came away with a pretty positive view of it. I mean, there's stuff to quibble with. It seems like all movies have elements of an idiot plot, but on the whole, I rate it thumbs up.
So as the world building guy. Would you say this movie significantly contributes to the world building of Star Wars?
I wouldn't say that it contributes to the world building at anything like really unique. It's just really polishing it, if that makes sense. Like everything looks good. The stuff that happens is a lot more logical. Like there's a more an example of this. There's a variety of weapons that the rebels use. It's not just like random blasters that they're shooting seemingly at nothing. Uh, they use different weapons. Like there's the shoulder fired rocket that actually takes out a target that in real life would be have an approximate level of force that that could actually handle. So everything was just much more balanced and made sense on the world design front. So it's not adding anything new. There's no groundbreaking new like stuff, which I think isn't bad necessarily because we had a lot of that in the sequel trilogy, and a lot of people seem to not like it when a bunch of things put in. I guess a good example of that is there was a bunch of debates about all of the ways that the sequel trilogy broke hyperspace. This doesn't have that, as far as I could
Yes,
tell.
it
It was just
does.
polishing things that
No, it
mostly
breaks
exist.
hyperspace.
So you
Yeah.
think the one time they jump
Jumping
while they're
from atmosphere
getting there?
breaks both Phantom Menace and A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Because if they could jump from the atmosphere to hyperspace, every bit of tension of Han escaping the Star Destroyers, of the Rebel transports escaping the Star Destroyers, and of the Queen's ship escaping the Trade Federation blockade is gone now. Everything is gone because now you can just escape, press a button, and you're free. It is horrible destruction of the rules of hyperspace set up in the previous six movies. This isn't one time, it's multiple movies, multiple key scenes.
Well,
In episode one, I thought the hyperdrive was broken, and it's the
No,
same,
no, no, no.
like,
The hyperdrive gets broken when they get shot.
right? And then R2 has to go out and fix it, and then they're able to leave, right? And Han, there are several times when Han can't go into hyperspace because they've made the hyperdrive be broken or just not working correctly, right?
Correct.
But I mean, I'm with you that it shouldn't be able to work in atmosphere, but I wasn't sure how
much more
it is.
minor of a thing, I think, than what we just got done
It
watching.
destroys the rules set up in three previous movies.
But it makes a great tense narrow escape in this movie.
All they had to do was leave slightly earlier and it would still be tense, and you could just show them getting to the upper atmosphere and then you can jump.
Those rubes.
Uh,
Anyway, yeah, so regardless of the small quibbles that we can have, and I can bring up my own things that I'm like, why did that happen if we want to bash on the details. But overall, I really appreciated the amount of thought they put into the design of this movie. I guess it was like super expensive at the time as well, so I can definitely see that after having watched it, why it cost so much money.
Well, let's see. Where do we? I mean, I guess moving more or less in line with the order here. The Saw character raises a interesting or a potentially interesting issue that I don't feel like they really opened up enough, which is like, how do principles play into fighting against evil? Right. And so on one hand, you have the rebellion proper, the good guys, but you also have this kind of rogue agent, as far as I can tell what he is, where he's also fighting the Empire, but kind of on his own rules, which is why he, I mean, is a little dastardly with this defected Imperial who comes to him, right? That doesn't treat him very well. Kind of ends justify the means mentality. But of course the good guys, right? They were sent over to try to like, work with him. I mean, get some information, but also potentially kind of bring him into the fold a little bit. I don't know. I feel like that could have been an interesting dynamic to really delve into. How do principles play into fighting evil? Do the ends justify the means as long as you get what you want? But again, I just feel like they didn't really open that up, or at least they opened it up but didn't follow it through.
right. And yeah, because Saw is an interesting kind of a gray character. He's not really a rebel. He's more of just a guerrilla. He's kind of useful to the rebellion at certain points. And he has a role in Andor. He's in Andor a few times as well, and there's a little more depth to his character given there. But I feel like this movie and the Andor series are really kind of about the personal costs of standing up to tyranny, like you said, like about the kind of person that it can make you into. And they repeatedly show, protecting a cause can lead people to sacrifice others as well as themselves. Andor kills that guy in the alley because he's not going to be able to climb out, and he knows he can't afford to let them learn what that guy just told him. But it doesn't glorify it. Cassian, he says, these guys and I, we've done terrible things for the rebellion. So people who believe in a cause greater than themselves, they're sometimes willing to become a kind of a monster and do terrible things so that innocent people can reap the benefits. But it doesn't tell us that is a good thing, really, when it comes to the ends justifying the means. And you see that a lot in Andor, and it gets deeper and deeper the farther you get into Andor as it leads up to this movie. The cost that people are willing to cause other people to pay, and then that they are at least also willing to pay themselves ultimately. So I think Andor deals with the issues really well.
Yeah, and I think that, that's I haven't watched Andor, so I can't really comment on that directly. But I do appreciate that they brought that in, that contrast between the idealism and pragmatism. In that Andor, he knows who he is, he knows what he's done, but he doesn't feel overwhelming sense of guilt, right? He feels justified more or less, even if we see even in this film he does sometimes question his orders, right? He doesn't kill her dad. He refrains from that. But I think I appreciate that it doesn't really answer that question of pragmatism versus idealism, but it does raise it in probably a significant way. I mean, there is a difference between the philosopher talking about ethics and someone who's actually in the trenches. Like if everybody is just opining over what is the ideal good, well, we're not actually going to necessarily get concrete victories. At the same time, if we're only concerned about concrete victories, we're going to lose the very good that we're fighting for, and we will become the monsters, right? And so it's a difficult interchange between idealism and practicality, and the answer is not always very clear.
Yeah, it's actually one of my critiques of Andor, which generally I think is an extremely well written and beautifully acted show, is that I feel like the show too consciously draws from the Russian Revolution and not the American Revolution. Not to say that the American Revolution was perfect at all, but I think that the results of the American Revolution have proved to be much more in favor of virtue and integrity and democratic republicanism and a general improvement of governance and standards of living than the Russian Revolution ever has. And it troubles me. Now, I'm not saying that you can have a perfect revolution. You're always going to make compromises to gain enough power to defeat something as large as an empire or the British Empire, which the Americans, I mean, we teamed up with France, which of course had slave colonies, and we had our own slave colonies. So there's certainly lots of ethical compromises that the American Revolution had. But the ideals of the American Revolution compared to the ideals of the Russian Revolution and the tactics of the Russian Revolution, I think are just qualitatively different. And it bugs me that Star Wars is drawing from a much more cynical well. It troubles me.
I would love to talk more about Andor at a later date when everyone has seen it. But those are interesting points. I think I only saw Rogue One at the theater once, and then maybe once later on. I didn't even remember that Mon Mothma was in it. I certainly didn't realize that they got the same woman to play her in the Andor series as plays her in this movie, and she has a much much larger role in the Andor series. So that was interesting. Uh, I'm glad it was good casting and that she was able to carry that when they put her in Andor.
I just have a small comment, if that's all right. Just based on time, how well can we compare like something like Andor to Rogue One? Because one episode of Andor is like an hour long, and this movie's 2 hours. So how hard can we judge it for not fully exploring the moral concepts it raises in the runtime that it's allotted?
For sure. And I'll bet that was probably part of the impetus for the Andor series was like we introduced these interesting characters, but they don't have any backstory and we weren't able to do a whole lot with them. And so I think they did flesh that out a lot better.
Going back to Saw for a second, Saw to me represents something different than Andor himself does. Saw's character actually goes back to the Clone Wars, and his particular planet was taken over by the Separatists. And so he was part of a small, uh, essentially rebel group that tried to retake the planet, if I'm fully remembering details correctly, before Skywalker and Ahsoka come in um, and kind of help them. And so he immediately goes from fighting essentially in a war on his home planet to now realizing he needs to essentially fight a war against the galaxy. And so the entirety of his dealt life is war. And when you spend so many years boots on the ground in a war, that's going to mess with your psyche. And where we see Saw, and it makes sense, he has zero trust of anybody. And when you can't trust anybody, that's going to make enemies on every single side that is not directly loyal to you. And you're not going to be quick to be loyal to a lot of people. And so you see him psychologically beat down. You also see him physically beat down. He is essentially Darth Vader with not as good of an insurance plan. Um, his feet are gone. He's breathing with some sort of breathing apparatus, and he doesn't have force powers like Anakin, so he can't sustain his own body. So he's physically beat down from war. And I think even with the way he goes out, he is just ready to be done with life. And so I think he is just a fundamentally different character in Rogue One than Andor um, is. It would have been interesting to see a younger Saw Gerrera try and work with the rebellion. I still don't think he would have philosophically agreed with how the rebellion um, does things, because he was always, even as a younger, more fit guy, a bit too aggressive for his own good. But it still would have been interesting.
Do we have anything else to say on Saul before we move on?
Now, I am curious. I think he's in like the Jedi Survivor or whatever the video game, the PlayStation 5 game. I think he has a small part in that. And like I said, he's in Andor, and I haven't seen his part in the Clone Wars. I'd be interested to learn more about where he came from because Rogue One was the first time I saw him, and his character seemed a little silly to me when that was the my only experience with him. But then after seeing him in Andor, it really worked a lot better to see him as this older version of the character that I had seen in Andor.
I think my problem with Saw, although I will say I really appreciate all you guys are saying, it has opened a new perspective and a new depth on Saw that I struggled with, is that I feel like he's not appropriately balanced. We don't really get a figure who works for the rebellion who's as compelling. Like Forrest Whitaker is a heavyweight actor. He gives an intense performance. And I like the gal who plays Genevieve O'Reilly. I like um, uh, Jimmy Smits, who plays Bale, and of course they recast him for Andor. And I like the cast that they got for the Rebels, but I feel like they should have gotten someone sort of like Stellan Skarsgård in Andor, who's a competent, who's the guy I was referring to, who's based on Lenin. But I think in Rogue One, it's unbalanced towards the rebellion being overly dysfunctional because of the figure of Saw, just because of the weight of the performance. And that's a difficult thing to do because when you're filming, you don't necessarily know how the performance is going to come across. And so casting a new person to try and balance that on the Rebel side would be difficult. It's just something that feels to me imbalanced.
Here at Mythic Mind, we believe in strength. Strength of mind, strength of spirit, and strength of body. And of course, all of these things are interrelated. And that's why I'm glad to partner with Strong Coffee Company and to offer you a 20% discount on their protein-enhanced coffee. Each serving is enriched with 15 grams of high-quality protein and 250 milligrams of adaptogens, including ashwagandha and theanine. This potent combination ensures sustained energy, improved alertness, and a calming effect without the jitters. And that's a difficult balance to achieve. A great tasting coffee that simultaneously gives you energy while at the same time calming you down. This unique combination of ingredients promotes better sleep and mental clarity, making it an ideal choice for people like us, people who need a little energy boost without losing clarity to a caffeine buzz, and who want to make sure that our body is ordered properly by our minds. And so head over to strongcoffeecompany.com and use the code MYTHICMIND. That's all one word. Use the code MYTHICMIND to get 20% off your entire order. strongcoffeecompany.com or click that link in the show notes. I definitely do think he's an interesting character overall. As I said, he does provide some contrast to the general idealism of the Republic. As Reverend David was saying, he's someone who grew up around war. I mean, much like you get like a Boromir figure, right? Growing up right on the border of disaster. And so naturally he's going to tend to fall into a kind of pragmatism, right? Of what is going to get results. And that seems to be where Saw ends up. Very easy to do that. To go back to what we're talking about, how sometimes you have to become the monster. Well, the problem is, what if you stay the monster, right? At that point, what is it exactly that you're feeding and why? But fortunately, he does have a good sacrificial arc where I guess he doesn't really do much through his death other than he accepts it, right? He embraces it. He's able to let go rather than to hold on in bitterness and hatred. So at least he has a good ending. I will say that one of my favorite lines in the movie, favorite parts, is when the rebels are all fighting over what are we going to do here? We don't have any chance. And she says, "This is bad. I forgot the main character's name. What's her name?"
Jyn?
Yeah, Jyn. Yeah, and she says something like, "Let's not worry about our chance, or what matters is not our chances. What matters is our choice," or something like that. Where the point is that the statistics here don't matter. It's kind of a don't tell me the odd situation. But her point is that what matters is not what is given to us, but what are we going to do with it, right? I'm going to keep going back to Tolkien apparently, but it's like that Gandalf quote where we don't get to decide the times. What we do to get to decide is what we do with the time. So I felt like that was very, very poignant. And did a good job of setting them up for their heroic kind of northern style sacrifice at the end of, we're going to stand, we're going to do the right thing, even though odds are we're going to die. Well, at least we're going to die well. We're going to make that death important. That's a major theme that I appreciate in Beowulf, this idea that like we're all mortal. We're all going to die. There's nothing we can do about that. But what we can determine is what is the value of our death in relation to the value of our life. Right. And so I feel like that idea does come through pretty well. And that redeems for me the fact that all the main characters die. Like it has the right kind of relationship to mortality. And so I feel like there's some value there.
I can't remember the line that the centaur says in the last battle. He has a similar line that he gives as he is dying. And it's been too long.
Right. That a noble death is something that everyone can afford. It's better than that, but yes.
Yeah, something like that.
I do have another comment on Saw, if that's all right. I found him interesting, not necessarily for who he was as a character individually, but for what he kind of represents in the group that he leads and their tactics. I know, think it was the Empire describes his group as like terrorists or something like that. And obviously, you maybe don't listen to the enemy to characterize their opponents, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually accurate. And that's partly why they split off from the main rebellion. So I think you see kind of an interesting contrast there of like, okay, so you have tyranny. How do you fight it? Uh, I'm sure you guys are familiar with like the alignment chart meme where you have like true, new, good, lawful, evil, all those ones. If we can place the rebellion in the good category or something like that, I mean, it's not the place to find the exact placement for those. But I think that you have Saw as like chaotic good, maybe. He's trying to do the right thing, but going about it in a way that probably isn't honorable and maybe has a lot of collateral damage. And then Cassian, maybe in contrast, because I know we were comparing the two before, is maybe like a neutral good. He has become a monster in some cases, as he admits, but he's also following the chain of command and trying to carry out his orders and things like that. Uh, and I don't know if we really have a character to fill out the like uh, true good or whatever fully, but the point is, I think that it raises very interesting questions about how do you resist tyranny and what are the acceptable tactics to do so. And personally, in real life, I don't think terrorism is acceptable in any circumstance. I mean, not in a rebellion. So hopefully, I don't have to ever test that philosophy. But I think it is something worth considering, like what makes certain actions in war or resistance legitimate and why are some not, even if the end result of people dying or whatever is kind of the same. What makes following the chain of command in a rebellion more legitimate than just going full guerrilla?
I think those are really excellent questions, and I really like the way Andrew framed it about if we embrace monstrous tactics, we may win, but is the government we've created really better than the empire in that case? If it's made up of people who are willing to be monsters to get power, ultimately, power to do good things, but Palpatine would say he was getting power to do good things, and there are certainly a lot of people in the Empire who would say he did do good things for them. Um, so I think that we do need to wrestle with these questions, but I very firmly fall. Probably you can tell already. I very firmly fall in the camp of the ends do not justify the means. If you embrace evil means, you have created an evil end, whether you intend to or not.
Yes, I mean, in moral conflicts, it's not good enough that the bad guys lose. The good guys need to win, which means they need to preserve some measure of their integrity. I mean, yeah, sometimes in a real conflict, I mean, maybe your hands have to get a little bit dirtier than you would like them to be. At the same time, though, you need to always keep in mind, like, what is it that you're fighting for? Is it for yourself, or is it for a broader context in which you find your identity, namely in the good? And if that isn't very pertinent for contemporary political conversations, um, I mean, I know that we all might fall somewhere on the political spectrum, so we're different. But at the same time, in the current conservative civil wars going on, I mean, it's it's very sad how mainstream certain monsters are becoming, and like the explicit Hitler and Stalin appreciators, right? Your Nick Fuentes and whoever. I mean, it's just like we need to be very careful about what it is that we're fighting for and not compromise to the point where even if we win, the monsters are still in charge, right? And so integrity very much matters here. Yeah, so very, very timely conversation.
And for the Christian, the ends don't ever justify the means, right? And I mean, some would even argue that the American Revolution was a violation of Romans 13. We should, this is the government that's in place and we just live within it. I'm not saying I'm making that argument. I don't know enough about, the details of all of that to know if that seemed like the Christian good to fight that war or any war. But it isn't as simple as we're not free, so we can do whatever is required for us to gain that kind of libertarian freedom that we feel like God has granted us.
Yeah, and it's another great question. As Judah said in the chat, I don't know if we're really equipped to do that in this Rogue One conversation, but I mean, it is a conversation worth having, and it does continue with the same theme of like, how do we balance out pragmatism and idealism? I mean, what are even the ideals that we ought to be following, right? So it's not even just a matter of pragmatism and idealism, but it's also a matter of what ideals are actually good and what ought we be attaching ourselves to. It's very easy in any context to just yell freedom and liberty, but we need to ask the question, like, what is freedom? Freedom to do what? What does it mean to be free? And of course, in our discourse, we're very often prone to attach freedom to kind of libertarianism as a political philosophy, where even if you don't call yourself a libertarian per se, what we generally mean by freedom is this idea of, well, I can do what I want to. But like that's not a classical idea of freedom, right? To be free is to live in harmony with what it is that you're supposed to be. You're free to be human in the most full sense that entails. And that doesn't just mean that you're able to do whatever. In fact, there's a kind of freedom that leads to the death of freedom, right? As you give yourself over to your passions that are actually going to inhibit the fullest expression of your humanity. Now, I mean, how that relates to Rogue One or even Star Wars more generally, I don't really know. I mean, the more that I spend my time thinking about this, and I don't even really know that I should spend so much time thinking about this, but like, is the rebellion even justified? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
The rebellion is definitely justified because the Empire explodes planets, okay?
I mean,
Fighting people who explode planets is justified.
Fair. I suppose that's fair enough.
But that didn't happen until after the rebellion had already started and been acting.
Yes,
I mean,
but
they didn't know.
This is also the Empire where Grand Moff Tarkin wipes out entire plazas of civilians to land a spaceship.
Yeah, that's an Andor. That's something that happens in Andor.
It's actually
Or it doesn't happen in Andor.
Way back in Jedi Academy trilogy.
Yeah, it's referenced in Andor. That plaza is in Andor.
Isn't the answer simply that if something that's kind of like the embodiment of evil in that universe is ruling, inherently that's not good? Like whatever order it brings to the galaxy, the foundation is entirely rotted.
Yeah.
And ultimately it won't bring about good because I think we can say the Sith are objectively evil in Star Wars universe. I mean, there's some random like relativistic statements thrown in, but it seems to be a pretty consistent current that the Sith are evil.
They're clearly evil, but the question is, I mean, as Christians, right? We're all Christians here. When are we justified to pick up the sword against our own government? Right? That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Rome was pretty wicked, right? But yet, under the Emperor Nero, Paul says, "Honor the emperor."
There again, I would have to look at the American Revolution, and there are a lot of conservatives today, or conservative Christians, not a lot of conservatives, but a lot of conservative Christians who really do struggle with whether they believe the American Revolution was justified. My dad's one of them. He genuinely looks at the issues and thinks this may or may not have been something that a Christian could genuinely justify, which might explain why there were a lot of deists rather than what we would consider evangelical type Christians. That I think there were probably Christians, and I don't agree with my father, but I greatly respect his analysis. And I think that we do have to be really careful that we don't slip into a Thomas Jefferson, who definitely was a deist, kind of mindset where it's just like, Tree of Liberty has to be watered by the blood of patriots regularly. Like this violent revolution is an end in and of itself. I think we have to look at things much more from Jefferson's statements that were tempered with wisdom from Franklin and Adams, and it's about God-given rights, a morally objective foundation, and a recognition that it's not just selfish interest or um, a desire for material gain, but there's a spiritual battle that's involved in justifying such revolution as well. And I think that's kind of what the Force is supposed to stand in for in Star Wars.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you know what? I a month ago I was in Ireland and I took a lot of tours and I heard a lot of Irish people and their opinions of the British Empire, and they kind of radicalized me against the British Empire and the ways that they treated them. They would not allow them to to have Catholic funerals or to worship as they saw fit or to um, speak their own language or have their own culture, the same way that the British Empire did to peoples all over the world. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not an easy question of whether or not, people like the IRA were they justified in the actions that they were doing to try and free their people. I listen to a lot of Irish rebel songs on tour buses, so uh,
And yet, I think from the perspective of someone administering the British Empire, like a Churchill or a Thatcher, if you look at the kinds of crime and neighbor murder that Ireland had during those times, it is very difficult to say, okay, we'll let you guys slaughter your Protestant neighbors. We'll let you guys blow up the Queen's great uncle and his grandson. Like, I don't think it's clean or neat.
right.
Not to be a complete apologist for Empire, but I think that Empire is not, in and of itself, a completely illegitimate form of government. And I'm sure this will get me totally canceled.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would entirely agree with that. I mean, I think that we've seen in this conversation that things are rarely black and white when we're talking geopolitics, when we're talking history, talking about how we get to even good states of being. I mean, um, and I think that you have to be intentionally blind to miss the fact that empires have done bad things, as well as the fact that empires have done some good things. Like sometimes bad places are taken over by law and order. Like we have to be willing to admit that, or we're just not looking at history. We're not looking at reality. And so Empire does some good things. Empire does a lot of bad things. And I think that an all or nothing approach just misses the particularities of reality. Um, Now, to be clear, the Empire of Star Wars did not do a lot of good things.
That we see. I promise you, they were civilized worlds and bring literacy to the fuzzy wuzzies.
The space trains are on time, I suppose.
Exactly.
Well, I had a couple other ideas that were not so deep as what we against my expectations we got into, but um Lucas, he'd originally envisioned the Jedi as being kind of a samurai-like group, and he kind of famously he wanted to have he thought about having Toshiro Mifune, the famous Japanese actor in samurai movies like Yojimbo and stuff like that, to play Obi-Wan Kenobi. I doubt his English was good enough for that to have actually worked out. But this is the first time we really see like an Asian force sensitive kind of a character that I feel like kind of I really liked that aspect of it. And I don't know his name. I looked it up even. I was like, I don't remember anyone ever saying that. But the blind force sensitive guy, he's always chanting, "I'm one with the force, and the force is with me," over and over. And that reminded me of there's like a Japanese Buddhist mantra, which is Namu Amida Butsu, and they say that over and over. It means I take refuge in Amida Buddha. It's like um, Pure Land Buddhism. It's one of the big sects of Buddhism in Japan. But they believe that by repeating that phrase, they're getting spiritual purity, and and it's sort of like reciting the rosary because they think it prepares them to be reborn into this pure land. And I really don't think that's a coincidence. It really feels like this is supposed to be sort of like a Buddhist mantra that he is repeating, just to of his devotion to the Force. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think that's true, but I also think, as always, in Star Wars, the Force is not merely Zen Buddhism transported to Star Wars. I think there's always some edges of Lucas's Methodist and the Christian Western philosophy that gets seeped in, because I am one with the Force and the Force is with me sounds an awful lot like people crying out to Christ to save them and this Holy Spirit to be with them in a more personal way than just existence or nirvana. At least this
Right.
this is my um, this is always my perspective on the Force. Is it we can't just read it as, oh, it's Zen. I think it's Zen plus some Christian theology, and I think as Christians, it's good to try and draw that out.
Hmm.
No, it
Yeah.
fits exactly with the influences that would go into it. I mean, George Lucas maybe had an admiration for Buddhism, but he still exists in the heavily Christianized, American Western culture. Even if people don't realize it, the assumptions of Christianity are just kind of baked into our thought processes.
Yeah, and there's no will to Buddhism. I mean, Buddhism is basically atheistic. It's an emptying of all your desires and that sort of a thing. So he's almost like a because he's talking about the will of the force constantly. It's almost like he's a Calvinist Buddhist sort of a mix through the film. He just starts walking through the lasers like I'm not going to die a moment earlier than the force intends for me to die, and I mean he doesn't. So I found that kind of interesting.
Right, going with a literal I am one with the Force and the Force is with me sort of thing. I, in pastoral care situations, actually tell people that sometimes in order to get through a difficult time, you just need to just simply say, I am with Christ. I am with Christ. And remember what he's done for you, the promises that he gives to you, that he will guard and keep you into the faith until either he calls you home or he rends the heavens and brings about eternity. Nothing wrong with just repeating the simple.
Right. It's like the Eastern Jesus prayer, right? Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Um, yeah, that is interesting. I never really thought specifically about the mantra that this guy uses. That yeah, I always interpret it as just kind of basic Buddhist stuff. But but yeah, that emphasis on okay, I'm one with the force, but also the force is with me. Like, he's still maintaining his individuality there. Like there's union, but there's also distinction, and that is I think a good point to emphasize. What other brilliant points of insight do we have, or controversial supports of empires?
To be clear, even though I support a reformed empire with Palpatine completely removed and all of Palpatine's closest cronies held for war crimes, uh,
When you're in charge.
I don't want to be in charge. I want to work at the Imperial University. I think that idea of people caught in the imperial system and uh, finding ways to try and make that system either collapse or make it better, like Jin's father does. Even though, as I said, I think that's a plot hole that did not need to be filled. I think the Death Star was just fine exploding the way it was in A New Hope. I think the character of Galen Erso was an interesting one, and I did enjoy his performance.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
idea that oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
They were I think they say something to the effect that they were going to build the Death Star with or without him. And if he was there, then he might be able to in some way um, have some small act of rebellion that would help in the long run.
I find it I don't know a little unsettling for the entire premise of the movie here that his role is in establishing this something of a plot hole in the originals as to why the Death Star was so easily just blown up because of this one weak point. Now let's create a whole movie to justify it, and that's what his role in this story is. I don't, it's just it's a bit much for me.
He still needed the Force. The Force still, he couldn't do it on his own. The, the other people tried, better pilots than Luke, but he let go and used the Force, and so it was all the Force from beginning to end. Uh, the end.
It's a good summary.
The Force worked through ordinary means of an engineer. One Going back for a second to the I'm one with the Force and the Force with me. Yeah, this this past Friday being Halloween slash Reformation Day, we watched the Luther movie, and in it he has Luther has this line. Oh boy, I just had it. Jesus Christ, save me. And he essentially repeats that line several times. So somebody with the theological acumen is somebody as Dr. Luther repeating constantly such a simple phrase, then certainly the rest of us should not be afraid to repeat the basics. Um, and then on a completely different point, I don't know, maybe this is just the little bit of an empathetic person I can be, but when Jimmy Smith's character Bail Organa, why did I forget that his name was Bail? Jeez. When he says, I would trust her with my life. Did anybody else feel that as like a bit of a gut punch there? That when you fully flesh that out, he did trust her with her life and kind
And
of essentially got him killed?
and then he exploded. But
I don't
she
think that was Leia's fault.
no, she tried to say somewhere
She
else.
even
Yeah.
gave up a minor
Tatooine.
rebel base for him.
Yeah. They were always going to blow it up.
That
But
reminds me, I also really hate the CGI actors.
yeah.
They look fake, and it repels me.
If George Lucas was still in charge, it would have all already been replaced 3 times with better attempts. But they've not touched it at this point, and I would really like them to. Uh, like I've seen people just on YouTube have redone the part where Luke first appears in The Mandalorian and made it look much more believable. I think they may have actually hired that guy to help them for the second season because they do a better job there. Um, but yeah, it. I think it would have been better to just not have uh, Moff Tarkin in the movie. It wasn't that essential. Um, but my wife was watching it with me, and when Leia, you see her and she turns around, she's just like, they just shouldn't have had her turn around. They should have just left her off camera, and I agree.
Yeah, they could just leave her facing away from the camera if they want to include her, and just leave it at that. That'd be enough. I'm not a fan of digital necromancy.
Just recast him, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. Tarkin's mouth was definitely the most noticeable thing. Leia didn't bother me as much because her screen time was so short, but Tarkin for sure, Uncanny Valley, 100%.
The only other thing I had was a piece of trivia I wanted to make sure you guys had heard. Did y'all hear how the planet Scarif got its name? Uh, the planet where they have basically the big Imperial hard drive. The director, his name's Gareth Edwards. He went out to get a coffee, told him his name was Gareth, and they wrote Scarif on his cup. And so he came back with that, and it was like, I've got our planet name, and they went with it. So I thought that was funny.
That's an R2D2 level name there.
Well, I guess that might be our ending point. All right. Well, cool. I like that this conversation got lively. I like that we got into some real issues, real contemporary issues, more philosophical issues. So cool. We'll see if we can match that as we get to Solo next time. All right, but we'll go ahead and wrap it there. And next time we will be talking about Solo. All right, until then, Godspeed. right, thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed that, if you enjoy the things that we do over here at Mythic Mind, then I encourage you to lend your support over at patreon.com/mythicmind. Whether you want to become an active participant, or you just want to be a silent supporter of the work that we do, any level of support is helpful, patreon.com/mythicmind. Any level of support will get you on the inside, full Discord access, you can join these chats, you can get all three of our podcasts delivered into one special patron feed, almost always with early releases for that. And if you don't want to become a patron right now, then I encourage you to subscribe to all of our podcasts at Mythic Mind. That is this one, the main Mythic Mind podcast, and then also Mythic Mind Games, where we take a similar kind of approach to video games. The next thing to come out from Mythic Mind will be, let's see, something over on the Mythic Mind Games, probably from the Elder Scrolls course. Soon we'll be getting back to the Final Fantasy series, but this week we'll be having a bonus episode from the Elder Scrolls course that I'm currently running, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube to get that, as well as the video versions of all that we do over here. And so find that YouTube link in the show notes and go ahead and subscribe there as well. All right, well, that's it for now. Next time over here, we will be talking about Solo. And until next time, Godspeed. Hey there. I got something really exciting in the mail today, just a few minutes ago. One of my newest sponsors is called Big Fork Brand. They're a family-owned Chicago-based company. They make pork sticks, they make jerkies, they make sausages, they make Chicago-style sauces, I mean, all kinds of things in that sort of arena. And they sent me a sample of a few of their things to try, some of their pork sticks and some of their jerkies. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. It's my first time having any of these products. And so I want you to be able to get my my honest reactions here. And so I'm going to start here with the pork sticks. I'll probably just open one of them for now. I don't want to open up all of them and use them all up at once, but let's see here. So got the original flavor here. We got a Thai green curry. Let me get in the camera there. Thai green curry and a maple and pepper. They all sound delicious, but I feel like I should probably start with the original. So let's do that. Now, I don't know that I've ever had a pork stick. I ate beef sticks pretty often. I like that quick protein hit. It's good on the go. It's good for just having a beefy snack every once in a while. But I'm excited to try out this pork snack if I can get through the packaging. Oh, there it goes. All right, so let's give this a try. It smells good. That is very good. In fact, let me do another one right now. Mmm. That's very good. It's a little peppery. It's a little bit smoky, a little bit sweet. It's an excellent flavor. It's not like anything you're going to go pick up in the grocery store or anywhere else. I mean, I get my beef sticks at Costco these days. They just got their own Kirkland's brand. That one's pretty good, but it's nothing compared to the flavor of this pork stick. So strongly recommend. I can't wait to finish this. I can't wait to try these other flavors as well. All right, now let's try out some of this jerky. Maybe I'll have a little bit of each of these. So let's see. Let's start with original. All right, start with the big pork craft pork jerky. Let me get that a try. Let's see, got a good bit of protein as you expect. You open up the package. All right, let's see. A nice big piece here. Let's give that a shot. Maybe I'll edit through the chewing a bit so you're not just watching me or listening to me chew. I'm not trying to make a pork jerky ASMR video for you. All right, so again, just delicious smoky flavor. That's really good. All right, let's see where we go next. Spicy three pepper or maple? Maybe I should do the three pepper. Okay, since if it's a little bit on the spicy side, I can end it on a sweet note. All right, let's see. Maybe I'll do a smaller piece this time. And also very good. Got a little bit of sweet, a little smoky, a little spicy. I need another piece of that. That very good. Man, this is good stuff. All right, let's finish this off here with a bit of the maple pork jerky. Let's try that out. It's like being a pork pancake here. But very good, very good. This, and I'm not just saying this because they're advertising with me. This is some of the best jerky, some of the best sticks that I've ever had. Strongly recommend them. They're all high in protein, high in flavor. Like this is good stuff. And I wouldn't lead you astray. So I wanted to record my first reactions here. So you need to go out and get your own right now. Head over to bigforkbrands.com, load up your cart, and use the code Mythic Mind to get 20% off your orders. That's a special deal for my listeners, special deal for my audience, 20% discount on your entire order. I strongly recommend everything I tried here, and I can only assume the rest of their product line is just as good. Now, if I had to make one recommendation based off the things I've had here, I got to give it to probably the pork stick. I really look forward to trying the other flavors of that as well. Also, if you like a little bit of spice, then the spicy 3-pepper jerky is really good. The original jerky, okay, it's all good. That's my recommendation. Go get it all, load up your cart, and use that Mythic Mind code, all one word, Mythic Mind, for 20% off your order. And then also let them know that I sent you. Well, that's it for now. Happy eating, and until next time, Godspeed.